Hello, this is Everett's vlog. Hi, Everett. Regarding the notion of self. And I say what you're doing, and you even said in a comment, is that your idea of self is the self. But I don't think you'd make that mistake with, say, your idea of a horse. If you say the horse was running, you're not saying your idea of a horse was running, right? The idea of a horse is meant to represent the real horse, and we understand those relationships. And when you say the horse is running, we know you're talking about a real horse. Yes, there's an idea of a horse that is partaking in the idea of running in your head, but it's all meant to represent a material phenomena, right? And it's the same way with the self. But with the self, we want to assume the idea is the thing. The idea of the self is the self. No, and nothing is direct. Your idea of the self is indirect from your behavior. People like to assume, oh, I know myself, I am myself, I have direct knowledge of myself. Nope, there is nothing direct. You find out about yourself through your behavior. You put yourself in situations and you will learn about yourself, okay? Things you did not know, things you will not just find from introspection, okay? The concept of the self is not going to be one of these a priori things. We're just contemplating the self. You learn everything about it. No, you're going to watch it behave just like you learn about anything else through the behavior of it. And so the idea of self is just an idea. Granted, it does not do the thinking. It's not meant to. The ideas of things are not meant to be the thing themselves. They're representational and separate. And the idea of self is similarly representational. Now, it's easy to imagine animals that do not take the cognitive time, do not to conceive of themselves. They just act. Does that mean they have no concept of self? Sure they do. They have an active one. They have an active one of what they're trying to protect. If they don't put words on it or have a concept specifically thinking of it as a self, because they just assume the self, because the self is omnipresent for them and they just have to act in reaction to it. Would you say they have no self? Well, I wouldn't. I don't say a person that has no idea of self doesn't have a self. I wouldn't say an animal that has no idea of self doesn't have a self. Even an inanimate object that we talk about as having a self, but not a willful self, but an entity type, an existence of self. Even though that's conceptual, something we put on that other thing, even then there is truth to that individuation. We have made distinctions between it and its environment, and there's a concept of self that arises from that. So yeah, it's true. The part that goes, I am Piero, is just a little part of my brain. It's not really the whole. It's trying to take a representational role, and that's the purpose of our consciousness. I think to take responsibility for all these parts of the body, including things that are far from in direct control, maybe not in control at all, and we still take responsibility for that. So yeah, I think it's pretty simple. It's map and territory kind of stuff, but it's just easier to fall into that with an idea of self, where we want to assume, once again, that we have a direct knowledge of this thing, and that the thing we're experiencing, which is the idea, in this case really is the actual thing. But no, and we shouldn't get confused just because the idea is in the brain and the extension is supposed to be the brain and the body. That should not confuse us about the fact that we're still forming an idea of a system, and that system is us, and the system exists, and the word self is associated with that system. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit. Cheers.